Hello, my sweet friends. Welcome back to the Book Nook. Now, it has been a while since I, Raggedy Auntie, have joined you, the people of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Roanoke, for a story. Today, I'm reading a story that's the very last story in the Story Bracelets curriculum for the summer of 2021. Bonnie and Jessie asked me to be here. And I know I look a lot like Jessie. Shh, don't tell anybody my secret. This story is called The Children's Crusade, and it was written by Kate Rodhe. What are we going to do? Asked Martin Luther King Jr., the well-known American civil rights leader, as he sat with his friends at a meeting in the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. Martin, who was trying to lead the Black people of Birmingham in their struggle to end segregation, was worried that he and his friends were going to fail in their mission. Nevertheless, he rose from his chair at the front of the group. Who will demonstrate with me tomorrow in a brave attempt to end segregation? Who will risk going to jail for this cause? Often, 400 people would show up for meetings like this one, but only 35 or so would volunteer to protest, and not all of those volunteers would show up the next day for the protest or march. Those who did would gather downtown and parade through the streets, carry signs, chant and sing, sending the message that segregation had to end. In Martin's day, segregation meant that Black people were not allowed to do the same things or go to the same places as white people. Black people couldn't go to amusement parks, swimming pools, parks, hotels, or restaurants. They had to go to different schools that weren't as nice as the schools for white kids. They had to use separate drinking fountains, and they could get in big trouble for drinking out of the fountains marked for white people. They weren't allowed to use the same bathrooms. Many times there was no bathroom at all that they could use. They weren't allowed to try on clothes before they bought them, like white people could. Black people didn't think that was fair, and some white people, like me, and probably like you if you are white, agreed with them. In the 1950s and 1960s, many thousands of people worked to end segregation, but in many places, especially in the southern part of the United States, segregation was the law. And if the Black people tried to get somewhere they weren't supposed to go, they could get arrested, beaten, or even killed. In the spring of 1963, Martin Luther King went to Birmingham, Alabama, one of the largest and most heavily segregated cities in the South, to bring people together to change this law. You see, the people were very scared. The sheriff in Birmingham was named Bull Connor, and Black people didn't know what Bull Connor might do to them if he caught them protesting. Martin Luther King had already been in jail once, and others were afraid to follow him. Besides, they weren't sure protesting would do any good. Martin, seeing that no one answered his call, again tried to inspire the group. The struggle will be long, he said. We must stand up for our rights as human beings. Who will demonstrate with me, and if necessary, be ready to go to jail for it? There was a pause, and then a whole group of people stood up. Someone gasped. All the people who had stood up were children. The adults told them to sit down, but they didn't. Martin Luther King Jr. thanked the children and told them he appreciated their offer, but that he couldn't ask them to go to jail. They still wouldn't sit down. They wanted to help. That night, Martin talked with a close group of friends about the events of the day. What are we going to do? He asked. The only volunteers we got were children. We can't have a protest with children. Everyone nodded except Jim Bevel. Wait a minute, said Jim. If they want to do it, I say bring on the children. But they're too young, the others said. Then Jim asked, are they too young to go to segregated schools? No. Are they too young to be kept out of amusement parks? No. Are they too young to be refused a hamburger in a restaurant? No, said the others. Then they're not too young to want their freedom. That night, they decided that any child old enough to join a church was old enough to march. The children heard about this decision and told their friends. When the time came for the march, 1,000 children, teenagers, and college students gathered. The sheriff arrested them and put them in jail. The next day, even more kids showed up. Some of their parents and relatives too, and even more the next day and the next day. Soon, lots of adults joined in. Finally, 1,000 children were locked up together in a children's jail, and there was no more room for anyone else. Sheriff Connor had done awful things to try to get children and the other protesters to turn back. He had turned loose big police dogs and allowed them to bite people. He had turned on fire hoses that were so strong the force of the water could strip the bark off trees. That means it could probably take off your clothes with just water. He'd ordered the firefighters to point those hoses at the little kids and roll them right down the street. People all over the country and all over the world saw the pictures of dogs, fire hoses, and the children, and they were furious. Now the white people of Birmingham began to worry. All over the world, people were saying bad things about their town. Even worse, everyone was afraid to go downtown to shop because of the fire hoses and the dogs. So they decided they might have to change things. A short time later, the black people and the white people of Birmingham made an agreement to desegregate the city and let everyone go to the same places. Today, when people tell this story, most of them talk about Martin Luther King Jr., but we should also remember the thousands of brave children and teenagers, just like you, whose courage helped defeat Bull Connor and end segregation in Birmingham, Alabama, and the rest of the United States. Let's keep their work in mind as we make an effort to create anti-racist spaces in all of our churches. Stay happy, stay healthy, and keep reading.